Welcome one, welcome all, welcome live to the Ultimate Hockey Show countdown to the expansion draft. Michael Dale alongside Red Petty. We will be here for the next hour setting up the NHL expansion draft, protected list, what each team needs to do in the offseason, and also recap one team winning the Stanley Cup. And we'll recap our hockey pool for the playoffs. I'm Michael Dale on the left, joined by Red Petty on the right. Good evening, Rich. It's been a couple weeks since I've seen you in person and on this show. How are things with you tonight?
Very good. I just had dinner, and it was very, very delicious. So I'm very happy. Yep. How about you?
I'm good. I just had dinner myself. I'm getting ready to watch the expansion draft with a small group of friends tonight. And then coming back on for a recap, which will come on about 8:45. We'll be joined by Corey Hume, a scout with ISS Hockey, looking ahead to the draft, and as well as looking at the analytical aspect of Seattle's roster. And we'll also look ahead to Friday's entry draft. I'll be joined by Bill Christensen, where we'll have an announcement to make on some programming, and we'll recap the Seattle Kraken expansion draft roster, which I can go on a rant. It's somewhat been leaked already. 29 of the 30 picks have already been made public, but that is the duty of insiders, as I've been told. Before we look ahead,
you're referring to sort of a
draft, let's talk about the Stanley Cup and Red Petty, the Tampa Bay Lightning, winning the 2021 Stanley Cup, just like you predicted, unlike me. The Lightning winning it in six in five at the Amalie Arena in Tampa. Your thoughts on the Tampa Bay Lightning and their Stanley Cup win?
Well, I'm gonna use a quote from a pretty good defenseman formerly from the Carolina Hurricanes, now a UFA, Mr. Hamilton, who said, it's not hard, or he didn't say it that way, but I will kind of use part of his quote to say, it's not hard to win the Stanley Cup when you're $50 million over the salary cap as compared to everybody else, including the team you're against in the finals. So that having been said, I didn't think Montreal or the New York Islanders would win the Stanley Cup. I thought it would be Las Vegas and the Lightning. Ended up being the Lightning and the Canadiens, and the Lightning won. And it was exactly, or should I say, pretty close to what I thought it would be, in that I just didn't think Montreal had enough weapons overall in their lineup to compete with the Lightning. They are a very good team, Montreal. They are built very well. If they hang on to their defensemen, mind you, Shea Weber is now injured for next year, but if they keep the majority of that hockey roster together, they're the type of team that might middle its way through the regular season, get a second spot, maybe a third spot in their division. But once they get in, if they get to their system and they play the right way, just like this year, they were the last seeded or second last seeded team that got, no, actually they were the last seeded team that got in. They were the 16th seed. They went all the way to the Stanley Cup. So it just shows you, right? Once you get in, anything can happen. So, but the Lightning are a much better team, or they were, because they're not even the same team anymore, because they've lost several players already in the last week or two since they hoisted the cup. But that's the way hockey is, boy. And it's even in this season, it was, we all know, because everything is compacted. You go from the Stanley Cup final and then right away, bang, 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 between declaring your protected list to the expansion draft to the free agency for the expansion team to now open free agency, the NHL draft. I mean, it's just bang, 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 everything all within like a couple of weeks. It's crazy. So it's going to be a very short off season, but I guess the happy part for most hockey fans is that we won't have to wait as long now for the upcoming season, because it will be upon us very soon. How about for you? Were you surprised by the Lightning winning?
I thought Montreal had one more upset in themselves. Sorry. not me. But again, Montreal didn't meet a team like Tampa all playoffs. 4 lines, 60 and a goalie deep. I thought Vasilevsky was the difference in the series, particularly in game number 2 and in game number 5. But you know what? You're as good as your goalie, and I didn't think Carey Price was as good as he had been in the previous 3 rounds. Montreal stopped getting a little bit of the timely goal scoring.
Yep.
Things were just a little bit harder for Montreal.
Yep.
That space wasn't there. I thought Tampa did a good job taking away the rush for Montreal. I mean, the backbreaker to me, and I think I mentioned this on the show last time, and that is the backbreaker to me was, okay, it's one thing to come home, down 2-0. It's a completely other unacceptable piece of work if you're Montreal and you're down in game 3, less than 5 minutes old, 2-0. That's already asking a lot. And as we saw, they couldn't recover. Game number 4 that Montreal won. They won. But there was it reminded me so much, Rhett, like the Vegas-Winnipeg series from 2018.
Yep.
Winnipeg kept games close, but when one team pushed game to shove, Vegas had the opportunities and they put them away. I thought the series was eerily similar. Hellebuyck wasn't as good as he was in the first 2 rounds leading into that series. And you know what? The Jets got out-dueled by Fleury, and I think Montreal got out-dueled by Vasilevsky. And you know what? I'm going to say something. Now that's 5 straight series for Vasilevsky with a shutout in the clinching game. He might have taken the throne for best goalie in the world, and it might not even be close. I mean, I know people put Hellebuyck in there as the best American goalie. I don't know who would be the best Swedish goalie, but I mean, I think you would have a pretty hard-pressed argument to consider that. Vasilevsky might be the best goalie in the world at the current time, given the fact that he also plays has a team in front of him that doesn't give up much. So that can be kind of a discussion point. But again, you know what? Your goalie is what it is. If a team plays good in front of them, the goalie is going to be good. So, you know what? With all due respect, this came down to goaltending. Price wasn't very good. Vasilevsky was very good. And perhaps maybe 1-2 games that they shouldn't have won. But, we have one game that's the outlier of every series. Montreal lost that game, but was the outlier of the series, and put them behind the 8 ball.
Yep. Yeah, and as we talked earlier, the margin between winning and losing is very small. So if Vasilevsky plays just a little bit better than Price wasn't terrible. He was just average, maybe even a little bit better, maybe a lot better than average, but he wasn't out of this world like Vasilevsky was. And except for the one game that was kind of an uneven score, most of the games were close going into the third period. So I'm saying that, it wasn't this. I mean, they won in 5 games. The Lightning were by far the better team. They didn't fluke it out. They controlled most of the play, but the margin between winning and losing is very small. And so that can sometimes be just the difference between your, between your number one and netminder being out of this world and just being fairly good. And that was the difference in the final. Price, he came down a little bit from how he'd been playing against the Jets and the Leafs and so on, and the Knights. And Vasilevsky just kept getting better and better and better throughout the playoffs. So, and he's got a superstar team in front of him, $15 million over the salary cap. But I don't want to talk about that anymore. We spent the whole show talking about that last time. So.
But I mean, if and you hit the nail right on the head. If Vasilevsky's worst series, goals against average wise, is 2.6 in the opening round against Florida,
Yep.
I think you want to get better and better and better as the playoffs go along.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
They're sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I agree. I mean, like some people, like there's some times where a team will fluke their way through in a series, or even in a, you know, or it might be, let's say, the net minding or their number one net minder. He plays out of this world and the team is not very good and goes through long stretches where they don't control the puck. They get a few fortunate scores and they win a series here or there, and their netminder carries them. And then you could argue and you could say, oh, it was kind of a fluke, or they fluked their way through, or they rolled the goalie and da-da-da. With Tampa Bay, they deserve the Stanley Cup. They were by far the best netminder. They had the best team system. They had the most scores. They had the most talent. They played the best consistently over those 16 hockey games that they won, and even the ones they lost. So I'm just saying, this was a year the Lightning won it. They deserved to win it. There was nobody that came even remotely close to being as good as they were. So it's one of those years where the very best team won, and that's most times the way it is and the way it should be. So
yeah, and you know what, we talked about Kucherov not being there, Tampa Bay, you know, unfortunate little blips to Carolina and to Florida in the regular season. That's why they finished third.
yeah.
But again, they beat both those teams in the playoffs. And you know what? If you have to beat the best, if you want to be the best. So, and that happened. And in a best-of-7 series, barring anything catastrophic, Rich, more times than not, the best team will win a lot of those series. It's in the best of 3 or the one-offs or even the best of 5 where the fluke kind of comes into effect. Best of 7, more times than not, you will get the team that plays better to win those series over the long haul.
Yep. Yeah.
Let's look ahead quickly. There's been some big news coming.
Well, hang on. Before we go, then we'll say, then we'll wrap up the Lightning winning the Stanley Cup by saying that the best hockey team won the 2021 Stanley Cup, and the best co-host of the Ultimate Hockey Show won the 2021 Hockey Pool for the Ultimate Hockey Show. 8-7.
We've always been close or tied to this point ever since we've done that.
Yeah. But I think if we counted who's won over the last, let's say, 10 years, 8-10 years, I think the scales might be just leaning a little bit more to Rick than to Mike. Just a little bit.
True.
But anyway, okay, we'll wrap up that segment.
I'll let you have your victory lap.
I'm not going to get up and jog around the room, no. But that's fine.
Well, but anyway, we do have some news, so let's spend the rest of the half an hour or 45 minutes looking at the expansion draft. There was some interesting trades that happened leading up to the last couple weeks. Number one, let's start with the trade that the Edmonton Oilers made, and I need your help figuring this one out. A middle round pick and Caleb Jones to Chicago for 100% of Duncan Keith's 38-year-old self and salary. What do you make of this trade from the Oilers' perspective before we get into how this affects them at the expansion draft?
Well, I heard it just came down to the fact that Chicago did not want to use one of their protected picks to protect Keith, but it would have been, I mean, this is that weird thing, right, where you've got a long-serving veteran, won Stanley Cups. You don't want to disrespect the guy like the Montreal Canadiens, let's say, did with Carey Price. You'd have to talk with him. You have to go through that. But if it's not going to work and you want to protect your long-term relationship with that superstar and his legacy and everything else, then you maybe talk about what else do you want? And I heard that on his non-hockey life, Keith, he spends large chunks of the season away from his family. He's got a son, an 8-year-old son, who lives, I believe, in British Columbia. So he wanted to be closer to family and friends. It's the end of his career. He's done everything he could do in Chicago. And so he says, hey, you trade me, find me a spot in Western Canada, Calgary, Edmonton, or Vancouver. And it worked out for Edmonton. And for Edmonton, they need help on the blue line. Getting a veteran who's won 3 Stanley, I believe it's 3 Stanley Cups, right? Chicago's won 3 Stanley Cups. And played a ton of games internationally. I mean, he's going to be a huge impact on Oscar Klefbom and who's the big, and Nurse and some of the other young defensemen they have there, and on Ethan Bear. So I think that side of it is invaluable. Now you roll the dice, and I heard Ken Holland say, and it's always the case when you trade for an old guy. I mean, he could get injured more easily. It's harder for him to come back from an injury. He probably injures, or he anything that's a recurring injury or sort of a nagging thing. He doesn't heal as quick. You might be getting the tail end of Keith, but maybe the tail end of Keith is still pretty good compared to 3 or 4 of the defensemen you already have on your roster. So is he going to play leading minutes? Probably not. I don't see him in a first pairing, but second pairing for sure, maybe third pairing. And he's reliable. He's dependable. He still skates very well. He doesn't have the same mobility and whatever, maybe not the same speed, but he still knows how to position himself well. And I don't know. I think I just like it that it's a real classy move by Chicago to allow the player to kind of pick where he wants to go, not have him plucked by the expansion draft and then shuffled here and shuffled there, and then he's traded right away after being picked by the expansion team for future considerations, and he's shuffled all around. Here, you give respect to the guy. He's been there for 15, 16 years. You ask him what he wants. Oh, I'd like to be traded to the West Coast or to a Western Canada team, and they accomplish that for him. So I just like it all around.
Is the problem his contract? I mean, it's a lot of money for the Oilers to take on at 100% of the cap, considering their salary cap constraints, is it not?
In some ways, yes, but you already lost actually Larson. He signed a deal with the Seattle Kraken, so that's $4 million that goes right. Actually, it was 4.2, I think, that's gone. So I don't know what is he making, Duncan Keith? About $8 million?
Yeah, 6.2.
Okay. So $3.5 million you got to make up. Okay, but you're going to lose a few players. You're going to lose some guys to free agency. You don't want to bring players. Listen, Edmonton has a lot of holes on their team. A big one is playing defense in their own zone. They've got to upgrade their scoring, and they have to upgrade their defensive play. Bringing in Keith, even if it's for a couple of years here at the end of his career, I don't know. You roll the dice, but you've got to change things up. You can't stay the same, right? It's not going to happen. So you have to make something happen for your team. So
yeah, it's the remainder of a 2 years left on a 13-year, $72 million contract that Duncan Keith has signed.
Yeah, but I think the last year, the AAV or the salary cap hit or whatever is a $7 to $8 million, somewhere in that range. But anyway, that's
the salary cap hit, but the actual cash comes in lower because that's one of those front-loaded deals.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do agree with you, Rick, about he would be a really good teacher mentor to Ethan Bear.
Yeah.
Ken Damage here, by the way.
Yeah.
I met Rick before. Those of you that know him from Game Time Today. The other trade that I wanted to talk to you about was the one that there's two of them I want to talk to you about. It's the Flyers.
Yes.
Making a deal with the Predators, then making a deal with the Golden Knights.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Philip Myers and Philip Myers going from Philly. Philip Myers
and Nolan Patrick
going to Nashville
Yep.
in exchange for Ryan Ellis going to Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
In turn, Philadelphia flips.
No, Nashville flips
Nolan Patrick to Vegas in exchange for Cody Glass. What do you make of, first off, the trade that Nashville did to get better defensively, younger, and then the Philly-Nashville swap of Nashville getting a young center in Glass in exchange for, Nolan Patrick going to Vegas?
Well, the Predators had to do something because they couldn't protect all their defensemen. They've got very good defensemen there. And they're also a little bit of, again, Nashville's one of those teams, I think they've kind of gone to their window and they've had to reassess and reevaluate. Rinne has retired, so they're going to free up some cap space by moving to Saros now, and they're going to bring a young guy under Saros, so they're going to free up some space on the net mining side. And then on top of that, they have to free up space if they're going to go after some free agents or trades or do some other things. They had to move a defenseman. I guess they like Ekholm more than they like Ryan Ellis. So away Ryan Ellis goes. Philadelphia is getting a very good defenseman. Philadelphia, you and I had them making the playoffs and being a cup contender at the beginning of the season. And then it all fell off the rails. And a big part of it was they could not play consistently well in their own end. Ryan Ellis will immediately make that team lights out better. And I'm not a huge Nashville Predators fan. I can't stand them because they play against the Jets all the time. But Ryan Ellis is a good defenseman. He is like, in the league, I would put him in the top 10. Very quiet. He plays in a market where there's not huge hockey outside of Nashville. You don't hear much about it. He will immediately make the Flyers better. Now, what do you have to do if you get Ryan Ellis? You have to give up somebody good. And I think Philadelphia, they got tired of the healing and the waiting on Nolan Patrick. He's been chronically injured, and that's the surprising part. So them getting Nolan Patrick and Myers, okay, now they get a defenseman back, a younger guy, a little bit larger, not as maybe offensively creative as Ryan Ellis, but I think a fairly good prospect and still with a lot of upside. And then they turn around and they hang on to Myers and they ship Patrick out for Cody Glass. So what does that tell me? It tells me Nashville is not sold on Nolan Patrick. I mean, Nolan Patrick's a number 1 or number 2 pick, whatever it was. He's right up there. He's a very valuable guy, and yet he hasn't lived up to it. And I think a lot of teams are very, do we want to take the risk and The Vegas Golden Knights, they have so many prospects in the pipe, and they got a lot of talent. They want to take the risk. And I think they wanted to get larger at center. They've got a lot of smaller centers. Cody Glass is another smaller, talented offensive center, and they wanted more of a rounded center who can potentially be number 1, 2 for the next 10 years, a large guy who can play well in his own end and score and win faceoffs. And Nolan Patrick has that potential if he stays healthy. So to me, I see Vegas as kind of saying, we've seen Cody Glass. He's kind of small. We're not really sure of his upside. We've seen enough of him at the minor league level. We're going to roll the dice on Nolan Patrick. And for Nashville, I still think Cody Glass has a lot of upside. He's not been injured. He's just was playing against 4 or 5 or trying to get on the ice against 4 or 5 other centers in Vegas, and he's going to have a big shot now in Nashville. So it's a great opportunity and sort of an interesting thing. I'll just leave you this kind of interesting that 2 Winnipeg kids, number 1 centers, switched up. So
yeah, who came out on the end on the bad side of this? I mean, I can't see a team that flat out lost this trade a few days after this deal has been made. To me, I don't see anybody that lost this trade. I think between Philadelphia, I think between Nashville, and I think between Vegas, this is the situation where everybody's kind of happy with what they got here. Or am I miscalculating?
Out of the gate, yes, because you wouldn't make the deal if you weren't happy with it. At least I think so. But I think, how I would evaluate it is like any trade, you never know until you get a few years under your belt. The same as Laine and Pierre-Luc Dubois. Like, it's going to depend upon, does Laine sign a long-term deal with Columbus versus Pierre-Luc Dubois signing a long-term deal with the Jets, and then how they progress over the next 8 to 10 years and become veterans and older guys and see how they perform. So you got to take a longer view to evaluate trades. In this case, I will view it this way. The team right now that won in terms of the least amount of risk and the most in the bank guaranteed, that's Philadelphia, because they get a number, like they get a 1-2 pairing, a defenseman right out of the gate. Now they risk trading away a number 1 center and a number 1 overall pick, but for them, they've run the gamut with Nolan Patrick. So Philadelphia wins or has the least risk and the most assuredness, if you will, in this trade. The team with the most risk but the most potential upside is Nashville. So they traded away a guy, but they couldn't keep him. So now they're going with a centerman, with the most risk is the Vegas Golden Knights, because they got a number 1 centerman. He's big. He's great. If he stays healthy and he develops, but there's a lot of ifs there, then Vegas does all right. And for Nashville, I think they see Cody Glass in his projection. And I think Cody Glass will be in the NHL, if not this year, next year. And he will be maybe not a number 1 center, but a number 2 center, like a Brian Little, a smaller, crafty guy, smart with a puck, a good skater. And yeah, so the most assuredness, Philadelphia, the most risk, but highest reward, Vegas, and maybe somewhere in between, Nashville, if that makes sense.
And that's a flat off hockey trade. That's something we do not see a lot of in this day and age. Most of it is a player for a pick. This is roster players moving for roster players and a 3-team deal. A good old-fashioned three-way trade.
And no money being held by anybody, right? And no, hold $3 million of his salary, whatever. Salaries go, players go. Yep, and it's player for player. I like it. We should see more of it. And whatever, that is I think we would if we didn't have a salary cap, because in the day, back going 15, 20 years ago, you had more of them. But now the salary cap is just another, the salary cap and UFA coming a little bit sooner than it used to, or the UFA player status, that combined with the salary cap has put more pressure on trades to be more perfect and precise to happen. So
right, because most trades, because teams are in relatively the same space, cap wise is dollar in, dollar out to the cent, basically,
or close to it, right? Or if you know you're going to lose, like that's why it's so interesting. We've seen some trades leading up to the expansion draft because teams had to get rid of guys they knew they couldn't protect, so they wanted to get something for them because they didn't want to risk completely losing them. They're going to lose somebody else, and they're more okay with that. So they go down that road. And now we're going to have this break. Now we got the expansion draft. And as soon as the expansion draft is done, boom, you're going to see, I think, a lot more deals. This year, more than any other, I think even though the salary cap is flat and it stays put, I think there, with the expansion draft and a lot of UFAs that have come on. I looked through the expansion draft list of all the unprotected players, and how many of those guys were UFAs. There are a lot of UFAs, and there
were a lot of. We'll get into the protection list momentarily, but there were a lot of. Okay, I dare you to take this player.
Yeah. Yeah, but let me just finish the point on the UFAs. Yeah. I think there's, even with Seattle, and Seattle's going to have their guys and assigned a few guys already and done all of that as part of the expansion draft, some of the UFAs. But there are going to be a lot of guys that we're used to. I mean, every year is like that, but I think this year we're going to see a lot of guys that have been in the NHL for a number of years just not find a place to play anymore. You're going to see a lot of guys like. I just think of Matthew Perreault, Paul Stastny. I mean, just on the Jets, Nate Thompson, Trevor Lewis. Like, and every team had at least 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, if you want to stay in the lead, you gotta take the minimum.
Yep.
And then you gotta be like the Corey Perry. You need to be effective at the minimum.
Yep. Or you have to bring some intangible and come with a player tryout or a tryout contract or whatever, and you just got to show up in training camp in fantastic shape, and whatever your value, whatever your asset is, you got to bring it in those 2 or 3 weeks so that you get a contract, like Corey Perry did with Montreal. Got signed to that entry or that pro tryout, right? PTO, I think they call it.
Yeah.
Showed up, boom, signed an entry-level deal, and he was kind of in and out of the lineup even at the beginning of the season, and then boom, and then away you go, and in the playoffs too. So it can happen, but how many of those guys aren't even going to get that chance? That's I wouldn't say the sad part, but that's the reality. That's hockey. There's no big, for every Wayne Gretzky that gets his final game and goes into retirement and announces it, he's on a Wayne Gretzky farewell tour in 1999 there, and he's playing out the season and saying goodbye to people. That's wonderful. He's a superstar. There's hundreds of guys that just their contract ends, their agent calls around, nothing. Hey, do you want to play in Europe? Nah. Do you want to play in the minors? Nah. I'll just retire. And then little note in the sports page, so-and-so, blah, 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 played 11 seasons or 9 seasons in the NHL, blah, 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 retires. There are going to be a lot of guys like that.
Here's a curious trade. For the first time in my life, we have a one-sided trade.
Oh, are you talking about
Yeah, I'll read it right here. The New York Islanders trade Andrew Ladd to Arizona for a 2021 second-round pick, a 2022 conditional second-round pick, and a 2023 conditional third-round pick.
And picks up the money for
Ladd.
Well, that's funny. You're right, because on the chart, like when you look at the tracker on the website for TSN, it says going to Arizona, Andrew Ladd, second round pick, and then Islanders, no return. It just says no return. That's what it is. So where do you ever see that no return? And then something's up, right? It's got to be
Rick. It all comes down to that forfeiture that they lost to their first round draft pick, right? So they're making up for it.
Yeah, and they wanted it some veteran leadership, and they did a pair of pits, 3 pits for taking on money.
Yep.
It just screams out to me buyer's remorse all those years ago, Red. And you and I have talked about this. Can you imagine if Chevy would have given that deal to Ladd, what Lamoriello gave to him?
I know. He'd be stuck with not just the deal, and then he subsequently signed Buff, but Buff's retired, and he signed Wheeler, who I like, but Blake Wheeler, as of today, even as of last year, he is overpaid at $8 million a year. And he's going to be for the next 3 years or 4 years, whatever. I think there's 4 years left in that contract. For sure, 3, could be 4. But anyway, $8 million for Blake Wheeler. Now, is he a great captain? Yes. Is he a good player? Yes. But is he the same player that he was 3-4 years ago when he signed that deal at the prime, sort of the number 1 assist guy in the league? No, he's not. He's lost a little bit of a step. He's just not the same player. He was injured last year. I'd be interested to see how he's going to come back this year. But that salary is just one of those ones that is going to hurt you as a team going forward in the next few years. And I'm so glad, to your point, that they didn't sign Ladd to that $7 million 6 year or 7 year $6 million. I knew it was $42 million, but I wasn't sure if it was 6 years or 7 years. So,
well, I mean, as you know, Rick, there's been some really, really bad things done in New York Islander history. So,
I mean, you go back to the Rick DiPietro deal. That blew up in their face only a few.
Yeah, but that wasn't Lou Lamoriello. That was the.
I know that was Garth Snow.
That was Garth Snow.
You said Islander history, not Lamoriello history.
But anyway, I mean, Lou finds a way to unload that contract, and all of a sudden he's got money to spend.
Correct. And Lou Lamoriello, I don't think he signed Andrew Ladd either, because he's come in.
No, he didn't. It was.
That was Garth Snow as well.
It was Garth Snow, so he's trying to undo the
correct.
The predecessor's damage.
Okay. And what does that show you, though? Overall, what does it show you? I know Jets fans, and we're going to go into this a little bit more about the Jets, but I'd love for the Jets to be a player in the free agency. Like, I really wanted them to make a pitch for Oleksiak. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But Seattle was able to jump in on it first. They have way more cap room. They can sign him to almost whatever he wants, $6-7 million. But those deals in UFA times more than any other become albatrosses 2, 3, 4 years later that you can't get rid of, and then you make a deal like this, everything going one way, including the salary, and nothing coming back to you. And the Jets, they stay away from that. Now, as a fan, man, I wish they would, sign a big free agent and bring a guy in like Oleksiak and bring this guy in, bring that guy in, and spend. But you know what? It's all great, but 2 or 3 years later, you get hamstrung, and then you have to do deals like this that you throw away a whole bunch of draft picks trying to get rid of this guy to a team that has salary cap. So even though as a fan, I wish the Jets would play more in that pool, more often than not, signing UFAs like this in the first days of free agency and running on a list and getting into some sort of a war, trying to outbid 2 or 3 other teams to get a guy that you're on. I'm glad we don't, as a team and as a city, don't do that, because it makes us more flexible in the long run. But that being said, I hate it as a fan, but I like it if I'm a hockey analyst and if I'm a general manager. So anyway, that's my sense.
It's interesting how the buyer's remorse comes back to sting you years later, and you keep trying to set yourself up for a salary cap that goes up and up and up and up. You couldn't foresee a COVID-19 pandemic. You couldn't foresee a flat cap for 6 years. Now you're screwed because you're banking on the fact that the cap's going up every year.
Yeah.
So the teams right against the cap are forced to give up players for next to nothing, and you gotta somehow unload some salary. Lots of salary retention deals, lots of fairly lopsided deals. I want to talk to you quickly, Rick, about the Jets protected list.
Yeah.
They wind up protecting the usual suspects: Copp, Dubois, Ehlers, Lowry,
Wheeler, Scheifele. Thank you. Those are the 7. On defense, they go Pionk, they go Stanley, and they go Morrissey,
and then your goalie is Hellebuck. Are you surprised Stanley over DeMello? Where do you sit on this? I have not seen a fan base more divided if you look at the Twitter machine.
Listen, yeah, okay. Well, anybody who thinks, let me put this. Remember how we talked about Logan Stanley, and he was not on the radar for anyone. And I told you when the Jets, they traded up to get him, they had to trade away a late second rounder or early second rounder to move those spots to get Logan Stanley. And then he played another year in junior or 2, then a year in the Moose. I had friends, AJ, if he's watching, because I mentioned his name before, he said, that is a bust. Cheveldayoff, that guy's never going to amount to anything. And I said, give that guy time. It's like putting a giraffe on skates, right? You got to teach the giraffe to skate. He's got the body, he's got the size, but it takes time. Let the guy develop. Not everybody is a Jacob Trouba that can come right in at 18 or 19 years old and play. Some guys take time. He's a long-term project. But I say he will be, once he gets there, that guy, he's got an edge. He plays mean and tough. 6'7". He's maybe like another Chara. I mean, he has the only defenseman on our team that can get slap shots through. Pionk does sometimes. But Stanley, where he came from at the beginning of the season to now, I am not surprised at all that they protected him, because that's a 4-year investment project, and they're not going to let a 4-year project just when he's hitting his prime and he's just coming into his own at 23 years old or 22, 23 years old, whatever it is, you're not going to let him go. And so they had to protect them. And I'm glad they did, because Pionk and Morrissey are small. You needed to have a big guy. Now, DeMello, you put him at risk, and he's a right shooting defenseman, but he's a 4, 5, 6 guy. You can find them in free agency, and with all the UFAs that are knocking around, you can bring up a guy from your own roster. But a monster like Logan Stanley, you can't, I hate to use that because it's used all the time. You can't teach size, but that was a smart thing. And you watch Logan Stanley in the next 5 to 10 years, he is going to be a complete impact player for the Jets. Killing penalties with a 6 foot. That's like a condor with a hockey stick, knocking down pucks and blocking shots and getting a slap shot through. And he's got a good slap shot. We've only seen the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Logan Stanley and his potential. There's a reason why he was a number one draft choice. And anybody who says they should have taken or they should have protected a DeMello instead of Stanley, I could tell you this. If they would have left Stanley unprotected, he's gone. They left DeMello unprotected, and he's still there. So that tells me all I need to know. How about for you? You think this was a terrible thing? They shouldn't have protected DeMello?
Well, here's the thing. I was of the fact that, okay, we're going to lose Logan Stanley if we don't protect them. I think that was a foregone conclusion.
Yeah.
I got to word this very, very, very carefully because I know I'm going to get some flack for it. The analytical community, there's people that believe in hardcore analytics.
Yep.
That a right-handed defenseman as cheap as DeMello, hard to find. The analytics for DeMello are better than those of the analytics of Stanley. First off, the guy is 5 years younger. DeMello is 5 years older. You would expect him to be further along in the development curve being 5 years older. Stanley needs a new deal, of course, because he's a RFA, and I'm pretty sure they're going to come to terms. Analytics is not everything for a general manager. I wish the analytic community would still rely a bit more on the eye test. And the fact of the matter is defensemen of Logan Stanley's size and stature don't come along very well and very often. What's the grumbling? Oh, the Jets' D-core's not big enough. Well, I'll tell you what. You want to eliminate one big guy and have to solve another issue, and then run the risk of, losing the guy that you spent all this time with. That I just don't understand. And to me, it was a non-issue. I heard all of last weekend about how the Jets are screwed if they protect Stanley over DeMello because of this, and that's mostly analytic related. Well, if the reports are to be believed, that was all a waste of time because the Seattle Kraken have settled on Mason Appleton, which is disappointing, but Mason Appleton is more replaceable than Logan Stanley and Dylan DeMello.
Okay, and I'll answer your point. As I said previously,
yep,
we know exactly who Dylan DeMello is. He is a second pairing, for sure third pairing, second pairing, possibly right shooting defenseman. Hard to find a right shooting defenseman, second pairing, hopefully matched up with a large guy. Maybe Logan Stanley and him together is not such a bad pairing, but hard to find. But analytics on Logan or on DeMello are great for his value. The team scores more goals with him on the ice than goals against. He's great getting the puck out of his own zone, makes simple plays, simple passes. He's not small. He's not huge. All those things are great factors, but we know who Dylan DeMello is. He is who he shows himself to be. He's not a big scorer. He's not going to play on the power play. He might kill penalties here and there. A good all-around, a quality defenseman you need in your lineup. So we know what we're getting. And the analytics are analytics. But then there's the eye test. And he's not going to score a lot. He's not throw his body around. He's not going to put fear into the team. Logan Stanley is big. Logan Stanley has an upside. We don't know everything that Logan Stanley can be. They say the analytics. What are the analytics? What do we know about Logan Stanley? He played a handful of games at the end of the season in a 56-game season and then played in the playoffs. How can you take that sample size and say he's not as good as
37 total games, keep in mind.
Can I tell you something? We're going to have a conversation at the end of this coming season, and we're going to talk about how good Logan Stanley is and how much he's improved and where his upside will continue to be. And DeMello will be the same DeMello, a good quality defenseman, right shooting. You love to have him in your lineup. He just adds. He's just another part of the team. But Logan Stanley, he's a team maker. He's one of those guys that you can't just find them anywhere. You don't grow 6'7", 230-pound defenseman anywhere who can skate, shoot the puck, are good offensively, have an offensive knack, and are nasty to play against. That and are nasty on the ice. Every team wants a guy like Logan Stanley. So to me, I'm glad they protected him. And look, you protect him and you end up with both. If you protected DeMello, you would have lost Stanley. Now we got both. We lost Appleton, and I agree with you. I love Mason Appleton. He's another project the Jets had for a number of years in their minor system, a late round pick, really developed and came into his own, a great skater. His upside is still there, but you had to lose somebody. Every team went through pain. Look at the Lightning. They've lost like huge chunks of they lost Yanni Gourde and
Barclay Goodrow.
Barclay Goodrow, they had to trade because they couldn't protect them, and then they end up actually losing Yanni Gourde. So I'm just saying, every team's going to go through a pain. It is what it is, but I'm glad the Jets, out of everything they could lose, what they lost is, to me, is the least amount of pain. That's how I read it. But
so,
anyway.
what does Logan Stanley's next contract look like to you? I mean, he's an RFA right now. Do you try to walk him 1 year to UFA, a 2-year bridge deal? $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million.
How many more years of RFA status do they have with him still? 3 more, probably.
Pardon me?
How many more years of RFA status with him? 3, at least 3 more, right? He's only been a pro 4 years, right?
Yep.
Is it pro 3 years or 4 years? Okay.
2 years with the Moose and 1 year with the Jets.
He was 3 years with the Moose, eh? Okay. So 3 more years. Yeah, I don't know what you do. If you'd sign him to 2-year deal, maybe you see if you can sign him into his UFA years. I don't know. But to me, Logan Stanley is a part of your team that makes your team better, and he's only going to get better. We've only seen the tip of the iceberg. What that means, like you sign him to, let's say, a 2-year deal for maybe $3 million a year. You see how he develops. And then after those 2 years, now you say, Logan, we want to sign you to something big with 1 year left of RFA status. You don't go to arbitration, and you sign him to a 5-year, I don't know, $30 million deal or $35 million deal.
Has Stanley played his way into the Jets core discussion?
Into the Jets what?
Into the Jets core player discussion?
Well, he is a core player because he was one of the 11 players protected.
True.
I would suggest to you that he is a core player.
That makes sense. What do you make of Montreal not protecting Carey Price, protecting Jay Chow, and then the theatrics going back and forth between the Habs and the Kraken?
Well, I don't know if it's theatrics or not. I just like, you know what? I like Cheveldayoff. I like him as a general manager. I think he does a really good job for the Jets. But there are some general managers in the league that are just – I just like their guts. I just like how they take risks. They do what they have to do to make their team better. I like Lou Lamoriello. I've got a lot of respect for Yzerman, what he built in Tampa Bay, and now what he's doing in Detroit. But one of my faves is Bergeron in Montreal, because he basically says, I'm not going to protect my number 1 goalie, the guy that if we would have won a couple more games would have been the Stanley Cup champion and probably the playoff MVP. I'm not protecting him, and I dare you to take him. I dare you. And with that, take his $10 million. And he has the conversation with Carey Price. Carey's got his wife is from that area. I think she's from Washington. Yep. So he wouldn't have minded probably going there to end his career. He's probably got a house out there. So he talks it all over with Carey. And he basically says, I dare you. And I'm sure Ron Francis calls him back and says, oh, we're thinking about taking him, but what would you offer to protect him or to protect him from being selected by us? And Bergeron goes, I'm not giving you anything. Go ahead. You want him? You take him. I dare you. I double dog dare you. That's basically what, I don't know if that's what the French saying is for double dog dare you, but that's basically what he did. And I love it. He just goes right up, and you know what they do? They don't take him. So
St. Louis did the same thing with Tarasenko. There were some unbelievable contracts out there. Guys like unexposed, like how, like Yanni Gourde, and it's like Okay, you know what? Here, take my cap problems. We dare you. You know, you got
Yep.
you got
Yep.
76 million.
I was going to say, but I think Seattle, they're being smart because I think they were not having to go all the way up, obviously, to the cap at 81.5 or whatever, but they had to hit a floor at 48 million. So they had to, on this expansion draft selection list, between the UFAs that they signed plus the players that they selected from the unprotected list of the other teams, making up that list of 30 players, that those salaries combined had to be at least $48 million right out of the gate. Now, if they're right at 48, 49, they got some guys they can put in the minors, some, here and there, depending if they have one-way contracts or two-way contracts. But now you can still play. You've got some room in there to go after the players that you want to go after. And I think that's smart for Ron Francis. I'm sure he figured it out. Like, we don't want to sign and select all these guys to be at 80 million, but we don't want to be at 48 either. We probably want to find some place right in the middle, right? So,
right, and then you look at it. I mean, most guys are under contract for next year, but need a contract the year after. So if things backfire, you can move them. You're not contractually obligated.
Beyond 1 year,
cap flexibility, which a lot of teams don't have.
Yep. Yeah, and you can make those. And if you're not a playoff team, which odds are they probably won't be looking at this roster, then they can make some.
We said that with Vegas, and what happened?
What's that?
We said that with Vegas, and what happened?
Yeah, but then we saw the team that they picked. There you go. We see the team that they've picked now, Seattle, and it's not as good a team as what the Vegas picked. I guarantee.
We'll see, because apparently there's a lot of drop picks and stuff going to Seattle.
But those aren't going to be in the lineup this year. So
true, yeah.
I'm just looking at that team. Even with the UFAs they've signed in Larson and Alexiak, they've got a few nice players with Kevin Dunn. Is it from St. Louis? Vince Dunn from St. Louis, and a few other players here and there adding into the lineup, Eberle and Appleton, and they got a nice mix of guys, but that's nowhere near the talent level that Vegas came out of the gate with, because I think teams learned their lesson, having to do so much to protect who they wanted and not protect others. They made some mistakes along the way, and I think they're not going to make that same mistake a second time. So
what do you make of Calgary letting Giordano go?
Well, what are you going to do? You got so many players to protect, right? I mean, I'm sure they talked about, like, again, this is another one of those things. I guarantee you, Brad Treliving didn't just throw this name out and say, this is our protected list. He sat down with Giordano, a 15-year Calgary Flame, or 16 years, whatever it is. You have the conversation. You explain it to them the way it is. Players know it's a business. There's no hard feelings. Maybe this hurt a little bit, but he looks at it as a new opportunity and a way he goes to a new city. So it is what it is. You're going to protect who you're going to protect. Look at the Leafs. They end up trading for McCann, and he ends up being unprotected. I'm shocked that they would trade for a guy that they wouldn't protect. And then somebody told me it's because they wanted to protect Hall. That's why they went with 8 skaters. They went with 4 defensemen and 4 forwards and 1 goalie versus 7, 3, and 1. And with that, they could protect Hall and then have an extra forward that they could leave exposed, which could then be selected. Now, did they want to lose McCann? No, but now they are where they are, and now they have to figure out a way to sign Zach Hyman, because I don't know how they're going to fit all those guys under the salary cap. That'll be fun.
But anyway, that's just me. I don't understand the point of trading for a guy and then not protecting him, and you wind up losing him and you get nothing. It just makes no sense. I don't know.
But these guys have their there's things that we see and there's things that we don't see, right? Remember that. Like, there's conversations that they have with the players. There's different things. Are you not interested, though, in what the Jets are going to do? I've heard they're in. Now we're looking, like we talked about Appleton, and he's gone, a great player, but we have to be in pain. Now the Jets, they're going to be playing here. I think I've heard that in the draft, both Craig Button from TSN and on another hockey draft, the Jets, they're just looking at what they need, and they're saying the Jets, they think, are going to pick Corson Kuleman a right-hand shooting defenseman, a 6'4", offensively minded but large defenseman, right-hand shooting defenseman. That's who they're going to pick at 18 in the draft, which is amazing. I think they should go after a defenseman, and I would like to see them sign somebody with a right shot, Sonny Big. But who are they in play for? I heard Ristolainen is in the mix from the Sabres because he's got 1 year left.
Okay, you know what? We left this to way too late in the show.
Why?
We'll have this discussion quickly in 3 minutes or less. I would never want Rasmus Ristolainen on my team without the assurance that he signs a long-term contract.
But you can't. Can you sign it or negotiate with a guy when he's still got 1 year left on his contract?
No, you can't. But I just don't want to be in the same boat a year from now, giving up the farm to get a guy like Ristolainen only for a year. That never.
Maybe you don't have to give up the farm if you have no guarantee. He wants a trade. He's open to being out of Buffalo. I think he's tired. He's been there for 7 or 8 years. I think 7 or 8 years, and he's lost. He has not made the playoffs in a single year that he's been with the Sabres. I think he wants to go to a good team. I don't think he's open to going anywhere from what I read. His interview in a Sabres paper and then in a local paper in the Toronto Niagara area. So he's open to all that. So why wouldn't you, let's say, trade a draft pick and maybe one prospect and trade one of your puck-moving little small defensemen, Sami Niku?
Does Sami Niku get the deal done?
I don't know. I would trade him. I would trade him and put together him and somebody else to get, or him and a draft pick to see if you can get Ristolainen. I don't think that'll be enough to get him out of the Sabres. But what are you going to have to give up? Like, are they going to ask for Ehlers? Well, they can go pound salt, right? They're not going to give up Nick Ehlers for 1 year potentially on number.
Respectfully, Buffalo can go fly a kite.
That's what I'm saying. So, but who is Ristolainen? He's a big right-hand shooting defenseman. The Jets have to find somebody to play in that top 4. I would argue they're going to have Logan Stanley and Josh Morrissey in the top 4. Those are 2 left-hand shooting defensemen. I would argue if you put Neil Pionk with Logan Stanley, there's enough size there, right and left shooting. You could maybe put Pionk. Again, I don't like him in a top 4. I think Pionk is a good 5'6" defenseman, but he's got tons of offensive talent. So you put Pionk with Stanley. You got to find a right-hand shooting player, not DeMello, to play with Morrissey. Ristolainen with Morrissey makes sense. And then you've got DeMello and whoever else on your last pairing, whether that's Poolman or Ville Heinola or whoever else you bring in, or you bring in a free agent. But to me, you got to find some size, and you got to find it on the right-hand side. And I don't think if they select this Carson Kuhlman, I don't think he's ready for prime time yet. I don't believe. I still think they need. I heard that he needs another year or two. So,
okay, we have some breaking news. Jamie Oleksiak has signed a 5-year, $4.6 million contract, AAV,
with the Seattle Kraken, right? 4 points, so just under $5 million, which is what I would have thought. I would have thought between $4 and $5 million. Now the Jets, obviously, they weren't even able to get in on this deal, and maybe Oleksiak, he didn't want to come to Winnipeg. Who knows? But
yeah, it's a very interesting scenario.
How much time
we'll let it go because that's all we got. We'll get back to you next Wednesday, 6 o'clock, same place.
We have lots to talk about with all the selections the Jets made, how they've made their roster better, and all the trades they've made.
Yeah, we'll do that. And then if you want to, everybody, tune in after the expansion drop, 8:45 for post reaction from me and the Game Time TV hockey crew. For Rick Petty, this is Michael Dale saying thank you very much. Hey, Rick, I'm going to get you to stay on the line because I have a quick question for you before we disembark. Anyway, on behalf of everybody, thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye for now.